It was just a regular weekend, and me and the guys decided to go on this multi-day hike. Our buddy Mike was leading the way. He was one of those outdoor types who always knows what he's doing. We figured with him, we'd be fine. The first day was pretty standard. Trekking, setting up camp, and joking around the campfire. We were in good spirits and the weather was holding up nicely. Day 2 was when things got weird. Very weird. As we were making our way deeper into the forest, we came across this group of buildings. Just out of nowhere. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest town, and suddenly there's this complex of large, imposing structures. They looked serious too, like government buildings or something. Everywhere we looked, there was no trespassing signs, but we didn't see any fences or any other barricades keeping us away, just the signs. The place seemed completely abandoned, so we shrugged it off and decided to check it out. I guess our curiosity got the better of us. Once we got inside, it was like stepping back in time. Everything was so old. It looked like a place of importance once, with desks, security checkpoints, and all that jazz. The aesthetic screamed the 80s, like a setting straight out of the Cold War spy movie. Just with the way the furniture looked, the phones, and the color of the walls, and just everything about it. We spent the entire afternoon exploring the buildings. There was something eerily fascinating about the place. Apart from some cool pictures and some vintage rooms, we didn't find much, but we decided to stick around for the night. The shelter was better than our tents, and it felt like an adventure. It was one of the weirdest things to describe. It was definitely freaky being in this strange building, but honestly, up to this point, it was probably one of the coolest things I had ever seen with my own eyes. When we were getting ready to call it a night, we noticed that there was this one heavy metal door that caught our attention. We tried everything to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. After a lot of huffing and puffing, we finally gave up and decided to turn in for the night. Sometime around 1 a.m, I woke up to strange sounds. Voices, I think. My heart started pounding as I woke up the others. The sounds were unmistakable. There were people in the building. We quickly gathered our stuff, not knowing who these people were or what they might do if they found us. I assumed it was some crazy people, or people using something, but I couldn't be more wrong. Just as we were about to leave, I noticed something. That big, stubborn metal door we couldn't open earlier, it was wide open now, and light could be seen coming from the doorway. And parked outside was a military truck. That's when the real panic set in. We didn't stick around to find out what was happening. We just ran. We kept going until we reached our car the next day. We were all shaken and exhausted, but grateful to be out of there. To this day, we have no idea what that place was. We tried searching online, but found nothing. Maybe it's better that way. After all, we were the ones trespassing. We certainly don't want to draw attention to ourselves or stir up any trouble. And besides, that unexplained mystery makes the story more chilling, don't you think? I am curious though. Does anybody have any idea what we could have possibly stumbled upon on that night? I'll do my best to relate what happened to me and my friend a couple of years ago. I haven't written anything since I was in high school, so bear with me as I try to tell you my story. So, me and my buddy Jake thought we'd try hiking something more than the typical trails near our hometown. We've always been adventurous, never entirely understanding our limits. We picked this beast of a trail, one even seasoned hikers would give a second thought to. Looking back, it was a decision full of youthful stupidity and not enough common sense. We started off strong, cracking jokes and snapping pictures like a couple of tourists. The sun was high and our spirits were even higher. But the deeper we went, the taller the trees grew, and the trails turned into a never-ending labyrinth. We tried to navigate our way back as the sky began to cast long shadows, but every direction looked the same, almost like a surreal mirror image. Our confidence quickly turned into panic. While we were traversing the woods, neither one of us was making any sort of mental note of where we were or where we were going, which I realize now is a grave error. With no choice but to hunker down for the night, we spotted a small cave nestled among the rocks. It was more of an overarching cliff, but it provided a partial roof for our heads in case it rained. Though our hearts were pounding like drums, the exhaustion from the hike overwhelmed us and we quickly fell into an uneasy sleep. It was more like passing out than falling asleep. A shrill giggle woke us up in the dead of night. Freezing, we climbed the nearest tree, hoping the darkness would provide some cover. It was one of those evergreen trees, so it was easy to climb up. Squinting, we saw this older woman appear from the shadows. Her laugh was one of the most unsettling things I had ever heard. It was a jarring sight, this woman alone in the wilderness, illuminated by the moonlight. She was almost at our tree when she suddenly halted. All I could hear was my heartbeat hammering in my ears as she stood still, her head tilted slightly as if she was listening. Then came the mumbling. Soft at first, gradually increasing in volume. The words were indistinct, barely above a whisper, but we could swear she was saying, "I know you're up there," but I can't be 100% sure. Even though we couldn't understand what she was saying, just her random presence alone was enough to scare us. We stayed silent, trying not to even breathe as she stood there for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she turned and disappeared into the forest as abruptly as she had come. Neither Jake nor I moved or spoke until dawn, when we could first see the shreds of daylight. We descended from our perch and we bolted. All the terror and adrenaline pumping through our veins made us forget about our fatigue and confusion. We just ran. When dusk was about to be upon us again, we stumbled upon a group of experienced hikers. I've never been happier to see fellow humans in my entire life. They guided us back to safety and back to civilization, even though they were a bit apprehensive themselves seeing the two of us flying out of the woods, practically screaming. We never spoke about the woman or about that night. Even to this day, I often think about that woman in the woods. Where did she come from? We were in the middle of the woods, and she just wandered over to us laughing like a madwoman. I know all things considered we're lucky, but I still have nightmares thinking about what that woman would do if she ever truly found us, hiding in that tree. This is a short story that happened to me a few years back. It was me and my girl, Laura. We were just looking for a bit of a break from the hustle and bustle of city life, you know? We figured a hike in the woods, just the two of us, would do the trick. An escape from the world. That's what we had in mind. Just us, nature, and the starry sky. We found this beautiful spot in the woods, miles from the city. It was peaceful, and the air smelled fresh and clean. We spent the morning hiking, talking, and just enjoying each other's company. Little did we know, our idyllic day was about to take a dark turn. Around midday, we see this couple in the distance. It looked like they were around our age, dressed nicely, seemed like they'd taken a wrong turn or something. They looked lost and a bit worried. So naturally, we wanted to help since this was literally the middle of the woods. And they looked lost and a bit worried. So naturally, we wanted to help since this was literally the middle of the woods when everything looked exactly the same. So it was really easy to get lost and turned around. We approached them and asked them if they were okay. I was expecting the guy to pull out a map or a compass, but instead, he pulled out a knife. The woman quickly moved behind Laura and me, blocking any chance of escape. They demanded our wallets, phones, watches, everything. Even took our backpacks with all of our food and water. We didn't argue or even try to fight. That knife looked pretty convincing. Then, like it was a scene from a horror movie, they tied us up to a nearby tree and taped our mouths shut. We were helpless, tied up in the middle of nowhere. They left us like that, disappearing back into the woods from where they came. We struggled to try to get free, but those knots were tight. We were there for hours trying to scream or make any sort of noise. Our hopes dwindled with every passing minute. By some stroke of luck, a group of hikers found us that afternoon. They heard our muffled cries and saw us struggling against the ropes. They cut us loose and we immediately called the police with one of the hikers' cell phones. We gave the police the best description we could, but it didn't feel like much. All we had were faces and the memory of that terrifying encounter. No names, no plates, no evidence at all, really. Just two ordinary-looking people who'd robbed and left us for dead. So here's the thing. You always think you need to watch out for the dodgy-looking ones, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the ordinary-looking ones, the ones you would never expect. They turned out to be the real monsters. The incident was a harsh reminder for us. Not everything is as it seems, and it's a story I share, hoping no one else has to go through what we did.